Every part of your life seems to be on track. You're engaged, expecting your first child with a man you love, and now planning your version of happily ever after. But then evil stumbles into town one day, and your life and those around you is never going to be the same again. And when your loved ones think that evil has finally been beaten, here come those that want to question everything done to exorcise it from the world. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. During the summer of 2004, 21-year-old Brandy Waryasz finds out she is pregnant and cannot be any happier or beaming any brighter. She cannot wait to tell the child's father. Brandy and her 21-year-old boyfriend, Brian Hall, are strolling along Atlantic City's famous boardwalk one afternoon. Brian had found some luck that day in a slot machine and won $136. So he finds the first jewelry store he runs into, walks in, and buys Brandy an engagement ring, kneeling like a Marine back from a tour of duty in front of everyone, popping the question. Not even knowing then that the woman he has loved since high school is pregnant. Brian and Brandy met in grammar school, friends for most of their lives, growing up in the same Western Massachusetts town. After Brandy quit high school and married an older guy from New Hampshire, she returns to Massachusetts when the marriage dissolves and soon reconnects with Brian. Turner's Falls is a village within Franklin County, northwestern Massachusetts. The Yankee Candle Factory and the Berkshires are not far away, and Turner's Falls is, by most accounts, a very small town with under 5,000 people. Nearby is Deerfield, where the prestigious prep school Deerfield Academy is located. All of it suits Brian and Brandy well. They can appreciate the simple things in life and the uncomplicatedness a humble way of living offers. They have dreams of a small house, local jobs, raising the child they have already decided to name Dane. First things first, however, Brandy needs to make enough money to hire a divorce attorney so she can legally end that impulsive marriage she jumped into after quitting school. As luck would have it, while living with her sister, uncle, and mother, her uncle approaches Brandy one day with a surprise. A Sunoco gas station along Route 5, the main road through town, could use some help. Her uncle says they will hire Brandy to work the counter, pump gas, and wash windshields. One thing about Brandy that struck me as I began this case is what her boss at the Sunoco later tells the Associated Press. Quote, "She always smiled and showed up at work singing." How many people in the world are like that these days? Brandy became known around the area as the happy-go-lucky gas station attendant, and some customers even went out of their way to gas up at the Sunoco simply because Brandy is so joyful and inspiring, her positive energy intoxicating. Traffic can sometimes be busy on the weekends when Brandy mostly works. That flagship Yankee Candle store brings in visitors from all over. And that is a good thing, because being busy passes the time. And even with that, Brandy never once complains about her job or, for that matter, anything else in her life. Living in gratitude is a gift, and many of us, yours truly included, need to focus on gratitude so as not to forget what's important. But for Brandy, even personal struggles or health issues did nothing to wipe that smile off her face or change her sunny disposition. It's just who she is. It's April 16th, 2005. Brandy is at work, and it's a fairly slow day. Her shift begins at 2 p.m. A local man who often stops at the Sunoco for fuel pulls in and then up to the pump. Brandy is by now showing she's 7 months pregnant. But again, she enjoys the work and has that goal in front of her of earning enough money to hire a lawyer. The man drives a 1953 red Ford pickup truck, a vintage classic vehicle. He gets out of his truck near 5 p.m., walks up to the pump, and begins fueling. Looking around, he sees a dark-colored or blue van, kind of beat up, parked next to the building in front of the door going in. The hood is up. The driver is obviously having an issue with the vehicle. After pumping his fuel, the man walks into the store to pay. As he passes the van, he takes a look inside. There's an older dude sitting, doing something the man cannot really see. At some point, the man in the van yells into Brandy, "Are you going to be there or not?" "I don't know. I'm not sure," Brandy shouts back. The man in the red Ford pays, walks out, takes another quick look at the van, gets into his truck, and leaves. Close to an hour later, a woman and her husband traveling along the road look down and realize they need gas. So they stop at the Sunoco. The husband jumps out and pumps the fuel and then walks inside to pay. That van is now gone. As he is walking inside, however, what he describes as a dark-colored, boxy van pulls in and up to the front. He recalls the van making some sort of loud noise as it entered the parking lot. The wife is waiting inside their vehicle and looks toward the gas station entrance and sees the driver of the van get out and walk into the store portion of the station. The husband comes back, gets in, and they take off. It's now just after 6 p.m. 10 minutes later, the bells ring inside the store, and Brandy looks up to see a woman sitting in her vehicle at the full-service pumps. The woman glances over toward the entrance and sees that same van parked in front of the door. A regular at the gas station, when Brandy comes out to pump the fuel, she and the woman exchange pleasantries. The woman recognizes the van. She'd seen it before at the station. "Everything okay?" she asks Brandy. Yeah. The woman asks again. Brandy responds, "It's really okay. The van belongs to someone I know." After paying, the woman looks around before pulling out and sees a taller man with blonde hair, wearing a red baseball cap, standing near the door heading into the station. The man in the van is older and black. The man in the baseball cap is young and white. Over the next 20 minutes, several additional customers drive in and gas up, and all of them see Brandy and the man in the van standing outside or inside, just hanging out and talking. It is clear Brandy knows this guy. Another man driving by at 6:30 sees the van, recognizes it and the man standing nearby as a dude he had once bumped into at another nearby store to buy some black spray paint. He remembers this because the guy had done such a shitty job spray painting his own van. At 6:40 p.m., a guy named Leonard pulls into the station, pumps $10 worth of fuel, and on his way into the store to pay, he sees a young woman and a man inside a car parked alongside the building. As Leonard opens the door into the store, the car hurriedly backs up and takes off. Inside the store now, Leonard hears this odd beeping noise. He doesn't see anyone around. He starts to call out for help while standing at the counter. "Hello," he says. "Is there anybody here?" I think we've all been here. You walk into a convenience store and it's like, well, who's tending the cash register? And then all of a sudden, someone appears from the bathroom or out from the back. Leonard is not getting any response as he stands at the counter shouting. So he walks around to the other side of the counter and steps into what is the work bay area of the service station, the garage portion where they work on cars. As he's walking in there, he stops suddenly. And there she is, Brandy, on the ground, unresponsive, with some sort of ligature wrapped tightly around her neck. There's no doubt to the man, as he fumbles for his phone, that she is dead. And I must interject here, only because the similarity is extremely triggering, and I cannot ignore it. My brother's wife, 5 months pregnant at the time, was found in a similar fashion, strangled to death with a ligature around her neck. And so this family, Brandy's mother and uncle, brother and sister, and fiance, are about to be devastated by this horrific news, and they will never be the same people again. Not ever. Trust me on that. I think this might be a good time to take our first break. Be right back. After that guy Leonard, who found Brandy on the ground, calls 911 and first responders arrive, it takes only a few minutes to pronounce Brandy and her child dead. Someone had come into the store and brutally murdered Brandy. Soon they discover that the entire cash register is gone. And so if the motive for this murder is robbery, Brandy has been murdered for a lousy $350. As investigators begin to look around the scene, at first glance it appears as if theft is what they are looking at. Someone coming in to rob the place and Brandy being murdered during that initial crime. Still, I think many of you who are longtime listeners know what I will say next. It's important to keep all motives on the table here and not get locked into anything specifically. Allow the evidence to dictate the track of the investigation. Motive does not have to be proven in any court case, as we all know. But it is essentially one of the most important factors of an investigation just beginning. If you can pinpoint why someone has been murdered, you can clearly begin to chip away at your suspect pool and get it down to perhaps a few key individuals. And here, as they start to go through receipts from the night and begin tracking down all of those people who had stopped at the station, investigators realize there is going to be a rather solid number of suspects. Because any one of Brandy's customers could have decided to rob the place. And of course, you'd have to include Brandy's fiance, Brian, until he can be ruled in or out. In fact, he should be the first person you speak to. Western District, Massachusetts State Police have always employed a solid group of detectives who have, for the most part, stayed out of the trouble other districts have become embroiled in within the state. Look, there are issues in every police department. No public servant space is immune from inner gripes and troubled people and even shady business. That is just the nature of human beings. But if you are listening to 34 Fairview Road, my limited series podcast about the Karen Reed case, out of the Boston area, Canton, Massachusetts specifically, you'll understand that some police departments are more prone to inviting trouble into their workspace than others, to say the least about the Norfolk County, Massachusetts State Police involved in the Reed case. But I want to be clear here. There are good, caring, and upstanding officers with integrity serving Massachusetts all over. The good far outnumber the bad and incompetent. That's so important to mention. That all said, in Brandy's case, several detectives begin to put word out on the street that they are looking for anyone with information about a robbery at the Sunoco where a very young pregnant woman was murdered. As it turns out, a sweep of local drug dealers is then done in Greenfield, Massachusetts, just in those days after Brandy's murder, with the intention of cracking into the group to see if any of them are willing to talk about what they have been hearing. So they round up what are dozens of local drug dealers and begin talking to them, all of whom are being held at the Franklin County House of Correction. As the interviews begin, investigators keep the focus on the murder. That word, murder, carries with it a reality check that police are not at all interested in the $350 taken from the station. And without coming out and saying as much, they give the impression that now is the time to talk about what you know if you do not want to be dragged into this as a potential co-conspirator or someone withholding information in a murder inquiry. As they begin talking to all of those local dealers, one name keeps coming up. Dennis Bateman, a guy in his early 50s that Brandy knew through Bateman's wife. Brandy had, in fact, been over to Bateman's house for dinner a few times, some reports claim. The name is not unfamiliar to police. Bateman had been mentioned a few times as they began talking to others. It was Bateman's vehicle, a black, self-sprayed, painted van seen at the Sunoco on that night Brandy was murdered. So the guy is a prime person of interest, if not for the theft and murder, as someone who might have helpful information. Investigators find Bateman, cautiously understanding that he could also be a witness, not a suspect. But they do need to talk to him. Bateman is also a known drug user in town, so there's that. And if you add the theft into the mix, well, you don't have to be Marlowe to figure out that drug addicts can sometimes commit murder to achieve their goals of stealing cash to get high. Bateman is found hanging out where his wife works at a local taxicab company in Greenfield. Like to talk to you, investigators say. Sure, he responds, seemingly very cooperative. He says he was driving from his home in Greenfield to a local DB Mart store to get some gas. He has a tab there, he explains, and he didn't have any money. But the clerk knew nothing about his credit tab and told him to leave. So he got onto the highway, Interstate 91, and began driving south toward Springfield. But then he had some trouble with his van. So he exits the highway in the town just before Turner Falls and begins driving along Route 5. He is thinking that he can maybe go to the Sunoco because he knows Brandy through his wife and she will probably help him out. Pulling in, his van began making a loud noise. Something is wrong. This is corroborated by a witness who went into the Sunoco and heard the van make a loud noise as it was pulling in. So they get a sense that, okay, he might be telling the truth. I need some water, Bateman asked Brandy after pulling in, and some change if you can spare it in case I get stuck going home and need to make a call. The water, he explains, is for the van's radiator. Brandy is very busy at the time. Customers coming in and out. It's near 4:35 p.m., Bateman says, so Brandy tells him to take some change out of her purse and she will get him a jug of water. I left there and drove to a department store in Greenfield where I broke down and then walked home, Bateman tells investigators. Did you make it home? They wonder. I wound up at a friend's apartment, he says, late into the night. And so Bateman gives them an alibi, essentially. He doesn't come across as sketchy or acting out of sorts. He seems helpful and they can check that alibi out, scratch him off the list, or move him up near the top. They then ask Bateman if he is willing to give his DNA and fingerprints, to which Bateman says, sure, no problem. After they finish up their business at the station house, one of the sergeants drives Bateman home. They begin chit-chatting. Bateman is talkative and begins reminiscing about Brandy and being at the Sunoco that night. He kind of just brings this up out of nowhere. He's not prompted. The sergeant never asks him to tell him what happened that night. Bateman just starts talking. Quote, we were like horsing around, he says at one point. You know, we were pushing and shoving each other around, and Brandy had this long, black, thin, belt-like strap she was hitting me with. And we were kind of like grabbing at each other, and I was pulling the strap back and forth from Brandy. It's an interesting statement. The sergeant knows that Brandy had been strangled with a black, strap-like ligature. But they had never released this publicly or told Bateman. And here is Bateman giving a reason for his DNA one could reckon, to potentially be found on that black strap, and also on her purse. Bateman, who wasn't such a strong suspect heading into that car ride home, considering how open he was with his alibi and giving DNA and fingerprints, he now becomes a serious person of interest. How can he not? Additional investigators return from all those interviews with the local drug dealers and have some interesting information. Bateman, a guy who never had any money on him, in those days after Brandy's murder, he began buying $50 worth of crack cocaine every day. And during one particular buy, while he was talking to his wife as the dealer got his package together, the dealer overheard Bateman tell his wife, "My fingerprints are going to be on her purse." Several more people the state police interview then identify Bateman's van as the van parked at the Sunoco shortly before Brandy was found murdered. And others there at the time getting fuel say they think they saw Bateman inside the store with Brandy, and it seemed like they knew each other. On May 3rd, 2005, Bateman is arrested on suspicion of murder and theft and placed in a cell at the Franklin County House of Correction. While there, Bateman starts up a conversation with a guy he knows from the street. They begin discussing what happened at the Sunoco. Bateman says, "Can you say I was with you between 4 and 6 p.m. on that day of the murder?" The dude doesn't respond. Bateman continues to pester him about it. "What happened?" the dude wants to know. "I went over there, to try to convince her to go along with me robbing the station so I could get some cocaine, but she wouldn't go along with it. So I killed her. But it was an accident. I was really drunk." Such a strange thing. Accidentally strangling a pregnant woman to death. Is accidental strangulation even possible? And writing it off as, "I was really drunk." Classy move. It borderlines on Bateman blaming Brandy. "Oh, I was drunk. What do you expect? You get drunk, you go out, you murder somebody. Happens. She should have gone along with my plan." This is potentially problematic, however, considering the source of the information. A known drug dealer who has been in and out of jail and who is facing serious charges himself when he comes forward with this information, as we all know, is hoping to barter for lesser time. Let's take our final break, come back to wrap this up. Dennis Bateman's case becomes a complicated mess of informants looking to better their own situations in exchange for testimony to help convict a man for murder. Several of these men later tell other inmates they made it all up to broker deals for themselves. And look, this sort of nonsense happens all the time, which is why, as an investigator, you need to stack your case with additional evidence is ironclad. In some instances here, inmates had even come forward and said they were promised big things as long as they went along with the status quo and nailed Dennis Bateman for this murder. The cash register was never recovered, so there is that. Then Bateman's case begins to draw out supporters for him, some of whom proclaim race is involved. A black man arrested for a murder in a white town is how one reporter frames it. There's also the insinuation of a second, more viable suspect brought up. A guy who smoked a lot of crack and had once allegedly choked out his wife while threatening to kill her. And yet, what happens in a lot of these cases is that the main source of evidence, if it can even be called such, is one person hearing from another that this other person saw something, who then saw something, who then told someone else. It's all bullshit. It's hearsay. So a history of violence and information separated by 3 different people is how these conspiracies begin, oftentimes stitching up the wrong man as allegations grow. The problem for them is none of it is actual evidence. What I look for is science and near unimpeachable circumstantial evidence, which can be as powerful as science if it is the right kind of evidence. Here, in this case, we have DNA matching Bateman's underneath Brandy's fingernails and on the black strap used to strangle her. For me, I don't need anything else. Do I believe Bateman's story about the two of them horsing around? Who cares? It doesn't matter to me whether that is true or not. Only that the DNA recovered underneath a victim's fingernails in strangulation cases is indicative almost in every instance of the victim fighting back while her murderer is depriving her of oxygen. It's a telltale sign in these cases of guilt. There's no other reason for Bateman's DNA to be underneath Brandy's fingernails. So after a 12-day trial in 2007, Bateman is convicted and sentenced to life. From there, a campaign is initiated to convince the public and the courts that he is an innocent man in prison for a murder he did not commit. That he is being scapegoated by state police investigators who convince drug dealers to make up stories for lighter sentences, and that he never received a fair trial. July 2023. After all the appeals, the case is sent to the highest court in the state, Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. And those justices affirm the decision of the jury back in 2007. Brandy's sister kind of put it all into context when she spoke to a local reporter, Dominic Poli, after the appeal decision. Quote, "They," meaning Brandy and her baby Dane, "meant and still mean the world to us. Time cannot change that. My sister didn't get to see her nieces be born. She didn't get to meet the most amazing sister-in-law in the world. My nephew didn't get to experience kindergarten. He would be graduating. He'd have a partner. You can't put a measurement to the pain that hits when you see places that you've been together and you reach milestones. No amount of time takes away that pain." That's it for this week. Be back here with a new episode next week. In between then, please check out 34 Fairview Road, my limited series about the Karen Reed case and the death of John O'Keefe. I need your help. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget, leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts, and log on to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com to contact me and suggest cases, or just say hi. And look for me across all social media platforms using the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. Thank you for supporting this show. I am allowed to do it because of you, and that truly means more to me than I can say. Be safe, be aware. Sources for this episode include SJC upholds 2007 murder conviction by Dominique Poli, Gazette.net, July 17, 2023. Free Dennis Bateman by Reverend Jonathan Tetherly, January 17, 2011. Commonwealth of Massachusetts versus Dennis Bateman, Memorandum of Decision in Order on Defendant's Motion for a New Trial, August 30th, 2019. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.